Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Alyssa and I work for The Word, a storytelling sanctuary. We are so excited to co host this event, and we are a nonprofit working to build a publishing community that will fight for inclusivity. Our mission is to promote voices from underserved communities and diverse backgrounds, to honor the stories of those who have faced adversity and injustice, and to provide a sanctuary space where we can see ourselves in literature. To learn more about our work, you can find us at thewordfordiversity.org. Again, that's thewordfordiversity.org. And I am super excited to introduce the amazing Angela Maria Spring, owner and founder of Duende District, doing amazing things. And we also have some exciting news at the end, right, Angela?
Oh, we do. The most exciting news. Lisa, it's always a joy to see you. You are the best. I love you. Welcome, everybody. And as always, so much love and gratitude to our partners, The Word, who have been working with us on this truly phenomenal virtual event series. I feel like it's almost 3 years now. Again, I'm Angela Maria Spring. I'm the owner of Duende District. We are a collaborative pop-up bookstore by and for people of color where all are welcome. And we have current locations in Washington, D.C. and Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I'm currently located. And for those of you who are new to our bookstore story, the cornerstone of the Duende Project is about the collective, the community, and the creation of decolonized literary spaces that center and celebrate Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So we are, and I'm just so beside myself with excitement. We are so excited to welcome our guest, Rubén Degollado, author of The Family Izquierdo, and his wonderful editor and one of my favorite people in the whole world, Nneoma Amadi-obi. I've worked with Nneoma as a fellow bookseller for years, and she is someone whose opinion about books I respect and trust implicitly. So when I found out she was Rubén's editor, I jumped at the chance to welcome her back to Duende as a featured guest, and I know the conversation today is going to be truly amazing. And Rubén is such a talented author, and we've been following him for a while, both on social media, and we carried his debut book, young adult book, Throw, and The Family Izquierdo. This is a truly special book. So just really excited to have them both tonight to talk about that. We'll put the link to buy the book in the chat. Please support the author, support us too if you can, and get his book. It's also just it's just a really beautiful book, y'all. You'll learn more. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat as well. And then at the end of tonight's event, as we talked about, we will please stick around for a few minutes because we will be announcing this year's winners of the Duende Word BIPOC Bookseller Awards. So we're going to learn a little more about our guests, and then we're going to have a little reading. So first, Nneoma Amadi-obi is an assistant editor at W.W. Norton, where she publishes literary fiction and nonfiction. Before joining Norton, she was a bookseller at Politics and Prose, Duende District, and Word bookstores. And Rubén Degollado is an educator from Texas and the author of The Family Izquierdo, a novel, and the young adult novel Throw. Fiction has appeared in Beloit Fiction Journal, Gulf Coast, Hayden's Ferry Review, and Image. So take it away, Rubén.
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to Alyssa and Angela for hosting us. So I'm going to read a little section that sets the novel up, and the section I'm going to read from, well, let me do this first. I'm going to read the back cover copy because we worked so hard to write it for you. And it sets up the book. So let me just read from the back here. The tight-knit Izquierdo family is grappling with misfortunes none of them can explain. Their beloved patriarch has suffered from an emotional collapse and is dying. Eldest son Gonzalo's marriage is falling apart. Daughter Dina, beleaguered by the fear that her nightmares are real, is a shut-in. When Gonzalo digs up a strange object in the backyard of the family home, the Izquierdos take it as proof that a jealous neighbor has cursed them. Could this be the reason for all their troubles? As the Izquierdos face a distressing present and an uncertain future, they are sustained by the blood that binds them, a divine presence, and an abiding love for one another. Told in a series of soulful voices brimming with warmth and humor, The Family Izquierdo is a tender narrative of a family at a turning point. And this is where the novel opens up. And the narrator is little Gonzalo, seeing this event of unearthing this curse that's in the yard, and present is his mother Victoria, Abuelita, and the curandero, and of course his father outside, Gonzalo. I could hear the curandero and my father walking around the yard praying the Our Father. Abuelita stayed in Susana's room praying, while Mama and I moved to Abuelita's room so we could see. I sat on the bed trying to watch them through the lace curtains, wanting to hear what they were saying. Mama held me, praying in tongues like she used to when my father was at work or out with my tios. I didn't mind it because it was always in a sing-song way. At times, I even understood some of the words, even though it was not in a language I had ever heard. One word I always understood was turroco, which meant holy. I did not like it at her church with all of them running up to the front, yelling at the top of their lungs, trying to outdo each other. Even though Mama said I was her little interpreter for the language of God, I always hid under a chair during altar call. Through the lace curtains, I could see my father following the curandero. The man walked a circle, holding a small medallion of San Cristobal. The healer held it out in front of him like some kind of divining rod. The medallion was still, but began swaying when he reached a spot directly under Susana's open window near my grandmother's mesquite tree. Here, he said. My mother came up behind me and watched what they were doing, praying under her breath, the heat from it feeling good on the top of my head. We have to cleanse the area before we dig out the entierro. Your mother has prepared the tools. You must get them from her. I did not like the way this man ordered my father around and thought Apa was going to tell the curandero to get the tools himself, but he came back with a shovel and a galvanized metal bucket. He set them down and looked at the healer for instructions. I had never seen my father act this way. At barbecues and parties and whenever he was working on Abuelita's house, Apa, being the eldest son, was always the one to lead his brothers, assigning the jobs, giving the orders. The curandero said, "Give me the knives and the alcohol." He placed the kitchen knives on the ground in the form of an inverted cross. My mother gasped and said, "God protect you, viejo." The curandero then poured alcohol over the knives and told my father to kneel with him. The curandero lit the ground with matches, starting a weak blue fire. He then began the Apostles' Creed, with Apa joining in. As they recited their beliefs, I realized that from where they were, the cross looked right. The fire died down, and the curandero said, "It's ours now. You must dig around the entierro without disturbing it." My father got up and kicked the shovel, cutting a circle into the earth. Once he finished, the soil inside the circle collapsed, as if the ground had long been ready to unburden itself. The man sifted through the earth and rocks, then found the entierro. My father moved away as the curandero stood and cleared dirt from something in his hands. "What is it?" Apa asked. The curandero held out something square and black, wrapped in plastic. "It is the picture of a man and a boy, probably you and your father." With this, Apa snatched it from the curandero. Later, my father would explain that it had indeed been a photograph of him and Papa Tavo. Brujo Contreras had punched 2 nails through the picture, piercing an X through the torsos of Papa Tavo and my father, the oldest patriarchs, crossing out our entire Izquierdo bloodline. "We must burn it," the healer said. "I wouldn't doubt it, the curandero put them there himself," Mama said, and turned to me. "Mijo, promise you'll never get into it. Curanderismo and brujeria, promise me." I looked into the pitch of her eyes, now mingled with something like sorrow, and it became blood to me. I said, "Yes, Mama. You have to promise to Jesus, mijo," she said, and squeezed my hands in hers. "I promise, Mama. I promise to Jesus." Her grip relaxed, and she said, "Good, mijo." Everything's going to be good for you now. The curandero explained that my father would have to burn it himself since he was the oldest son and closest to being the head of the household. Apa laid the portrait in the metal bucket. He poured alcohol over the entierro, lit a match, and dropped it in. It sputtered out. My father lit another, then another, his anger growing with every failure. The obscenity began slowly, under his breath, as if my father were a child saying the words for the first time. The maldiciones became more specific, directed at the Brujo Contreras down the block. In Spanish, Apa damned all of the Brujos family to hell, where they would watch their father be eaten alive forever. The only time I had ever heard my father curse was the few times when he drank liquor, which seemed to have a different effect on him than beer. Where beer mostly put him in a relaxed mood, hard liquor made him defensive and suspicious of everyone. Mama covered my ears and spoke in tongues even louder, trying to drown out his cursing. Although I did not know all of the words he was saying, I could still hear him, and I understood what he meant. And then I saw my father's eyes. Even in the darkness, I could tell that they were bulging. There was too much white in them. His eyes didn't look right. They looked wild, and I'd never seen him look this way, even at his angriest. Even though it frightened me to hear those things, see him this way, I could not turn away. The fire started, much like Apa's cursing, slow at first, and then engulfing the entierro. As my father cursed the Brujo Contreras, fire lighting up his face, dogs in the neighborhood began to bark. At first, it was just dogs in the houses nearby, but soon all of the Zavala's dogs were howling like they do when they hear a police siren. Some of the barking was desperate but vicious, like that of little dogs who had been cornered. Through the chain link fence of the house next door, I saw Teddy Ramirez's half-breed Doberman, teeth bared, the fur on its back standing up. It barked like it wanted to get at Apa. Then it threw itself nose first into the fence, circled around, and did it again. Under the howling, the curanderos said, "They're barking because they sense the evil spirits leaving your family." "Gracias," Apa said. "Gracias a Dios." He was calmer now. My mother put my head on her lap and stroked my hair. "Shh, mijito, it's okay," she said, because I was shaking and crying now. Mama began singing in tongues, and this was the first and only time I ever understood all of what she said, not just a few words here and there. It was this over and over, coming, not leaving, coming, not leaving, in her sad sing-song way. Thank you.
Just saying that was incredible. That is the first time I've had you read that chapter, and it has such an incredible power. It's actually spine tingling. Thank you. I just want to start by starting at the beginning, which is, how this project began. We began working on it together in the late spring / early summer of 2022, but you've been working on it for some time before that. And I thought perhaps you could talk us through the history of this book. How long had you been working on it, and how did it come together?
Thank you for that question. Is everybody hearing me okay? Am I coming in fine? Yeah, okay. All right. So very long, circuitous, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word correctly, but long journey to publication. I wrote the first story in this collection, which initially was a collection, and I wrote the first one probably about 25 years ago. And the first one was the one I just read, was Turroco. And it got published in Hayden's Ferry Review. And then I started writing other stories, but I kept coming back to this family for some reason. They kept drawing me back. And then every probably once a year, once every other year, I would get a story published with the Izquierdos. And what I found was I was telling a narrative about an entire family. And I kept coming back to them and coming back to them. And pretty soon I had this whole mythos created around this family, that, you know, a saga per se. And so probably about, I would say, about 10 years ago, I had enough where I thought, okay, this is a collection. I can put this together. And then I sent it out, and you know, it was rejected a few times. And then meanwhile, I had this other book. You can see it behind me. I had this other book, a YA book, which is Throw. And that tells the story of Cirilo Izquierdo, who is a pretty prominent character in this family Izquierdo. But it's about him. So that one book, I got that published in about 2018. And getting that book published, you know, meanwhile, I had this other book, The Family Izquierdo, on the side. It gave me the courage to go out and seek representation to get this to a wider audience. And so even though I had, you know, all these stories together, enough for a collection, I didn't really have, I guess, the courage to think, you know, somebody's going to want to read this. I liked it, you know. I was a big fan, right, of myself, but I wasn't sure if other people would really get into it. So I saw representation. I used Twitter. I used a Twitter pitch. DV was the one where you tweet and you kind of give a little synopsis in a tweet, and if an agent likes it, they're asking you to, you know, send them a letter. So I did that, and then I got a couple of likes, and I sent it out. And my journey, like, was the interesting thing about my journey was like, it was like decades of a lot of, you know, just little journals here and there. And then all of a sudden I had the book published, the first book. And then when I did that with the tweet, I got representation within like my fifth try or so. So I got representation, and then within 6 months, my wonderful editor enters the picture. Nneoma comes into it. Nneoma, woo! She just came in and loved it. And then I got that phone call. I think it was a phone call. I don't remember. But yeah, he gave me a call, and my life changed after that. So yeah. So it's a funny journey, because a lot of people, you know, they say they send things out, you know, hundreds of times. I didn't send this out 100 times. It landed when it needed to land, and it landed with the exact right editor, which is who's before us right now, my amazing editor, Nneoma, done so wonderful with it.
Thank you so much for the compliments, and you got to know how much I love this book from the very first beginning. And I think we've talked about this already, where there was just from the very beginning that scene with Papa Tavo and emotion instantly drew me, and it's that emotion and that warmth. It's part of what makes this book so special. And I'm glad that you kept on trying, because this book it's a thing. It's been published. We all get to finally meet the family Izquierdos, and to relish in the warmth of this family, and to meet someone who is and to meet someone like you, who you know, I think that journey, I hope you agree with me, has been entirely worthwhile. So having had a sense of your story as a multi-year journey, the story of creating this book as a multi-year journey, I'm fascinated by how you've managed to put together this multi-generational family, and to because you've got a family tree at the beginning of the book, and there are some members of the family that are not main characters, quote unquote, or narrators in the book. And there's something really fascinating about how you've created a whole family and created this life and history for them over piece by piece, story by story, over multiple years. And for some reason, I'm just mesmerized by that process, because it must have been quite an enormous challenge. At least it feels like that for me, for someone who, like myself, who isn't a writer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say that. So there's if y'all are not familiar, there's a family tree. Nneoma's referring to that. So there's 10 siblings. So there's the Papa Tavo, and there's Valentina. She, you know, the older, the first generation, of course, that you see. And then you have 10 siblings, brothers and sisters across the board, and they all have kids. So in the book, you hear primarily from like everybody says it's the left side of the spread, the layout, right? You hear from the older siblings, but you also do hear from the third generation, the cousins. And so for me, I come from two very large families on my dad's side. I have 13 uncles and aunts. And then on my mother's side, I have 7. So like every fiction writer out there, there's always an element of truth to things. So I took an average. I got somewhere between 13 and 7. I'm like, I can't do 13. That's too many. And 10 is already a lot. But like for me, the idea here is that coming from a large family, everybody has a unique voice. And the way I think of the book is almost like a party. And there's a lot of parties in the book. But when you're at a party and you have a lot of family members and you know them and you love them, you can hear their voice from across the room, even their laughter, their breathing, they cough or sneeze. You spend enough time with family members, you know exactly who that is, who's laughing at the other end of the room. And even if there's a lot of people there, you can always distinguish the one voice. And so when I put it together, I wanted to make sure that, coming from that experience of a large family where everyone has their own voice, their own unique take on any story that's told, I wanted to have all these different narrators to be able to have this ensemble of people telling a story that's one overarching story, but also telling these individual episodes of about themselves, but also connecting to the larger thread, the larger narrative that I have.
Yeah, I definitely feel that in the book. And I think I've talked to you already before about how voice is one of the things that drew me to this book. You know already that Maggie is one of my favorite characters in the book. And I think she will be my favorite character in any book because I just love her voice so much. I can't describe what Maggie looks like, but I know what she feels like from her voice, if that makes any sense. She has such a distinct voice. She's such a fantastic storyteller. And so I want to talk a little bit about, since we're speaking about voice, I want to talk a little bit about the voices in this book and the challenge of creating these distinct voices and making sure Maggie does not sound like anybody else in the book, and making sure that her voice carries its own story and its own history. Like Maggie just feels so real. And so could you talk to us a little bit about taking on that challenge and the delight of taking on that challenge and creating these distinct, rich voices?
Well, thank you for that. But first of all, Maggie is, if y'all aren't familiar, Maggie is a hairdresser. We have a term, she's exagerada. She's very exaggerated. She likes to shock folks, with stories that she tells or just the way she phrases things. But she has this gift of knowing what exactly someone needs to hear when they need to hear it. So she gets what's called a word of knowledge. But getting to her voice, and all the voices really, for me, the voice, when I write a story, it's almost what comes first. I need to hear that person very clearly before I sit down to write. And sometimes I'll write a few sentences, and the voice will be a little vague. But when, like, Maggie is one of the few narrators that, like, I heard her right away. And so she's kind of a pastiche of family members that I have, but also, like I said, her profession is as a hairstylist, as a barber. And so I just remember going to like Justicuts or Supercuts, and these wonderful stylist barbers would just talk and tell me stories. And for me, a big thing of getting these narrators down is just really listening to people. I listen to the little phrases they use, like for example, Maggie will say "Válgame," wow, she'll say that phrase. And if you hear somebody saying that, you know that Maggie's the one saying it. And other things, when I remember hearing someone tell a story, their phrasing was saying, instead of "I said," they would say "I go," "she goes," and then "I went," instead of using that tag of "said." So the voice has to be very clear to me. And then as I'm reading it, like I almost have to read it objectively, and I'm like, is that something Maggie would say, or is that something Marisol would say? Because, you know, my tendency is to just listen to what they're saying and making sure that the voice is very unique. And then the other part of it, like when it comes to voice, is I want the personality to come through. So you may see them interacting with people, but you may not fully understand their personality. So for me, like I said, voice is the first thing I hear, and that personality has to shine through before I feel confident in writing them down.
You know, I have to share that's incredible and fascinating, and it reminds me of something I read last night. About Toni Morrison and Kraft on Twitter, and it was an excerpt from an interview she had done where she talks about dialogue done properly can be heard, and she talks about having to rewrite and discard to remove the print quality of language to put back the oral quality where nation, volume, gestures are all there. And I think your book really does a fantastic job of capturing that oral quality, of making these characters feel distinct, of making sure that Marisol sounds like Marisol and Maggie sounds like Maggie, and they have those rich histories and that personality just in their voices. It's like I said, it's one of the things that instantly drew me to this work, and I think you just do a phenomenal job of it.
Yeah, she's and just getting back to Maggie, like, probably if I had a favorite character, it would probably be Victoria, but the one that is the most fun to write, because it's almost like I'm waiting to hear what she says next, right? So Maggie is definitely the character that I love to spend time with, because she's just a blast. She's fun to sit down and write with her. I just enjoy it so much.
Was there any character that you had a difficult time capturing? You talked about how much you enjoyed writing Maggie and how it was the first one that came to you distinctly. Was there any character that it took a while to really bring it to life, to really get their voice right?
I think, great. Thank you for that question. I would say probably it's Gonzalo, the eldest son, because he's such a complicated character. On the one hand, he is on the surface very much machista, which, if you're not familiar with that term, he's very, borderline toxic masculinity going on with him, if not overtly so in some scenes. And it was hard to get into that voice because get into that character, because he also has this other side where he is very caring, and you see it in the book where he does take care of little Gonzalo and his wife Victoria. But yeah, he was probably the hardest, and I never wrote a first person story with him, because it was so hard for me to write from that perspective. So if y'all get to read the book, you'll notice that but the voice I went with to tell his little story, little section there, was actually second person. Because I for some reason I just needed that narrative distance, and I could not. I tried getting into his first person voice, and it wasn't working. But then I got into the second person voice, and I don't know if I shared this with you, Nneoma, but the second person, the person that's narrating his story, is him in the future. So I wanted him to look back when he's a better man, when he's seen the error of his ways. And he's seen his own journey to being a better father, where he's looking back to who he was. So that's why I chose that second person to tell that story.
Wow, it's actually fascinating to hear you say that the narrator in that is Gonzalo from the future. It really does add a layer of complexity to this is, I'm guessing, the story where with Papa Tavo at the with the sofa.
Yeah, the sofa chair.
Yeah.
What you burn, that chapter.
Yes, also it's an incredible story, obviously. But I think that's really fascinating to hear that it's him from the future narrating that story. One of the things I found fascinating about that is there's a sense of almost having seen Gonzalo through Victoria's eyes, and for me in that chapter, because she I think more than any member of his family understands who he is, like his demons and the better, how he could be a better man. I mean, I think that's what she's striving for in some ways, to help him get to that better place and to help him show that whatever demons he has in his life. So I am just really excited to have this extra piece of information that really enriches my reading of that book, of that chapter. Okay, so I think this is actually be a really great place to talk about storytelling as one of the themes of the book, especially oral storytelling. The characters in this book are also narrators, and then by the time we get to the final chapter by the time we get to the end of the book, there's a chapter that's narrated by many voices speaking in one. And I think that chapter really brilliantly captures, the idea of storytelling as one of the themes of the book. And this is like an open-ended weird question, but is there a way you could sort of, talk to us a little bit about how you approach storytelling as one of the themes of your book?
I've never been asked that. That's a good question. Thank you for that. Love that. So I'll come at it from the approach of just the structure. So when you have a big family, right, and I have all these narrators telling the story, coming from an oral tradition myself, an oral storytelling tradition. So an event happens, right, and everybody tells the story in their own way. And so there's a term we have, it's called chisme. And if you speak Spanish, you know what I'm talking about. Chisme is like gossip. So people will tell a story, and then it steamrolls and it gets bigger as it goes along. And so I think with storytelling, there's when you have an oral tradition and you try to put that into a book, it's a challenge because you want your readers are showing up for you. You know that you want to get details right. You don't want to confuse them. And so what I tried to do, like you mentioned that collective narrator towards the end, the we, first person plural. What I was trying to get at with that is that everything that you have seen so far is told through the lens of these individual people. And then I wanted to say, okay, you have those individuals, but then when you get to the end of it, you have the we narrator, and they're the ones that are going to kind of show you that there's some conflicting viewpoints on all the stuff that they've seen so far. And so I think that's the beauty of storytelling, is that we can look at an event and we can see it separately. We can see it, with our own perspective, our own take on it, our own spin on it. But at the end of the day, who gets to tell the story is the thing that fascinates me is always who gets to tell the story. And like with this one, I couldn't, just the way, the nature of the book, I could not pick one person to tell the story because it would not do justice to this tradition of, everybody has told this story at some point. This brujo, some of them believe all the things that have happened is just because of life. Some of them believe it's because of anxiety, inherited or not. And then the other ones, they think it's this curse, right? But I wanted to say, let's tell a story where you have a lot of different people coming at it from different angles, because that's how oral storytelling traditions are, is they'll focus on particular facets of a story to tell one huge narrative. So I don't know if I answered that, but maybe it was
yeah, no, that was a fantastic answer. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that leads me to a question that I hadn't really thought about until now. We've talked about, we've talked about how relatable the Schedos are, the Schedo family are. I mean, I think that's one of the, I think nearly every blog we received or comment has just talked about the relatability of this family. And I come from a Catholic Nigerian background, and I find this family quite relatable to mine. And when you talk about storytelling within a family structure and how everyone has you know, their own spin on what happened, and stories get transferred through the generations, and it gets twisted a little bit. And the idea, and in some ways, the question of like what is true no longer matters. It's just like it's no longer. I don't think truth becomes. I don't even know if there's just a concept of like something being objectively true. It's just everyone's got this pain, and part of family law, the family history is that this person says X, Y, and Z and believes X, Y, and Z, and someone who believes X, Y, and Z, and those things come together and it becomes part of the story of the family. And when you talk about these Gatos in that way, it really does remind me of my own family law that has been handed out from generations and how no one ever really agrees on like what happened.
Mm-mm.
We just talk about it.
And you don't have to. That's the really cool thing, is you don't have to agree. You know, it's all part of the narrative that you're sharing and the shared history that you have together. So I think that's, yeah. And when you talk about relatability, that to me that was like, are people going to relate to? I mean, this is a very specific time. It's set in the 90s, and it's set in a very specific region, the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, which is, you know, this area that's down, this small little area that is down along the border. Because when people say South Texas, a lot of times they think, you know, San Antonio, but there's this region, hundreds of miles long that's right along the border. So I thought, are people going to relate to this? And I'm finding, obviously, you related to it. You saw connections to it, and I think but Luis Alberto Rea, he said anyone with a family will find themselves in these pages, and so to me that was like the highest honor, because I'm trying to write a story that everyone can relate to, but I'm writing for everyone in a sense, but I'm also writing to the people that I'm writing about, which is a very unique and I think a beautiful people that I'm trying to represent here, the folks from McAllen, Texas, and Rio Grande Valley along the border.
Yeah, I had a question here that I was going to ask you about the importance of the setting of this novel, which I said is McAllen, Texas, and what that meant to you and why you thought it was important to set it in McAllen. I think you've answered that question already, but if you have more to say about the significance of that place, whether it's personal or otherwise, I just want to make sure I give you a moment to elaborate if you like.
There was a review by Kawhi Strong Washburn, I believe I'm saying the name correctly, but where he mentions that there's a lot of border stories, and they involve trauma, they involve border patrol, cartels, all that type of stuff, and when you hear McAllen in the news, you hear border crisis, you hear all these terms referred to McAllen, Texas, but for me, to tell a story
Ruben, I think you froze actually. Can you hear me? Just gonna give him a moment to see if we can.
We'll give him a second. This has been such an amazing conversation already. I love that he was talking about McAllen, because like I think about McAllen and the writers, and who I was just reviewing some poetry, and I really love the poets and writers from the Rio Grande Valley. It's so special, and I think about like Norton. You guys also did. Ruben's book is so important and really special, and really, I think having a family saga like that, as he was probably alluding to, is that like, yeah, there seems to be like all of this drama in that area, but being able to create this really rich tapestry of a family, and like the lives, the real lives of the people from the Rio Grande Valley is really great. And I kept thinking too about the Five Wounds, which came out last year, which is set in northern New Mexico. And these pockets of just really amazing places, and to be able to Kristen, she also like created this really amazing like family. It's not nearly as like I cannot stop thinking of Rudolph and Naya when I'm thinking about this book, and that's a good thing. Like I can't stop. Like, do you think I'm just like I like the ghost of Rudolpho is with me now. I'm in Albuquerque, so probably he's the closest anyway.
I'm, very excited by that connection. It's one of the in our first conversation, how Ruben and I bonded was talking about this book, um, uh, the Night Wound and Night at the Fiesta, Night Wounds, sorry, the Five Wounds and Night at the Fiesta, that we both loved, and how it was such a lodestar for us in writing and editing. Well, he's already written the book, and editing the book. We just, a lot of, once we found out that we had this shared love for these two books, we went on.
That's wonderful. I love that, like, because my brain kept going there, and I love that you guys bonded over that. That just makes me so happy. Well, Ruben's trying to get back on. Like, what was one of your favorite things about editing this book?
I think it comes down to like, for me, it's voice and emotions, and I think I've talked to Ruben about this, is that first chapter where you see Papa Tavo and Abuelita planning their lives together and thinking, this is the beginning of a new chapter. This is where we're going to build our home. I can really see the vision. I can see the future. That has such a strong emotional resonance for me. And then it's just like those small moments. It's when Cirillo walks into the kitchen, all his aunts are there, and he says hello, and everyone greets him with so much warmth. I come from a really big family myself, and that felt so real to me. It is the Christmas scene where everyone's gathered together and they have this family tradition, and you honor it. And it's those moments really. When I talk about this book, I do, one of the things I like to talk about is those moments that end up making up the life of a family. And this book does such a fantastic job of capturing those moments and the emotions of those moments. They seem so ordinary because they're everyday, but they're actually quite special. And then once again, it's just falling in love with characters like Maggie and feeling the warmth. She's such a, I obsess about Maggie, so I'm so sorry if I'm going back to her again. But she has so much warmth, and I think the warmth that she exudes is symptomatic, or really captures the warmth that, like, this book, the family goes through a lot of stuff, but there's so much warmth, and this book envelopes you in that warmth. And we're working on this book during 2020 where everything was just madness and chaos. And to come back to it and feel that love and warmth, and to think that I had this special place, especially because editing is such a lonely job. And it was just really special thing to feel that love every time I cracked open this book and sat down to reread it or revise something or the other. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Ruben, welcome back. We were singing your praises. We were talking about like how I was just really happy about how this was such a beautiful, rich story set in the Rio Grande Valley, which I think is a really special place. And then also just talking about how I couldn't get the Five Wounds out of my head either, because I also thought that was a really special book. And Chris's book and your book, they're very, very different, but they hit the same heart notes.
Yeah.
So I will let you guys continue talking. And this has been such an amazing conversation.
So can you hear me okay? My internet dropped. I'm on my phone now. So.
No. Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly where we ended, but perhaps this would be a good time to sort of like look quickly at some of the comments that have come in.
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, great! It's popped up. Ruben, go ahead.
Ruben, I love the role of maps in your book, particularly because the ending is set outside of Texas. Which of those chapter stories did you write first, the map part or the ending? Ooh, that's a good question. I think I wrote the chapter, the chapter with Papa Tavo and his maps afterward. I had that in my head. Definitely had that in my head that was something that was behind the scenes. Because if you recall, in one chapter, Cirilo mentions Papa Tavo, and he has this analogy of of the map of where he's been being reflected on his hands, on the veins, on the liver spots. And so I had that in my head, and then I wrote the chapter about his collection of maps. As you see in the last chapter, the Juan Izquierdo Seferino goes further than any Izquierdo has ever gone. He actually goes to Cannon Beach in Oregon, and people might think, well, that's an odd place to end the story, and the novel is in another state altogether. But for me, it wasn't, because to me, it was saying that this one grandson fulfilled his grandfather's dream of traveling outside of Texas and going further than actually seeing the West Coast. So to me, it was a kind of a beautiful way of just putting that together and seeing that he actually fulfilled this dream that his grandfather had for him, for the grandchildren.
I have a question from Angela, who says, I would love to hear more about Victoria, unpacking her a little bit and why she was so important to you.
Victoria's an interesting character because she's an outsider. She's let me explain that. So she's married into the family. She is Gonzalo, the oldest son's wife. So she's she's not an Izquierdo by birth. She's an Izquierdo by marriage. And to me, she's kind of like my observer in some ways of seeing all of this family. And certainly there's a lot of different in-laws there. But what she doesn't realize until maybe the very end, I don't want to give too much away, is that she has more power and more influence in the family that she's known all along. And so that's the interesting thing to me about Victoria, like I said, is that the way she sees things is almost like if you had to pick any character that's seeing the truth of what's actually going on and the perceptions of what's going on, it's her, because she's, like I said, she's outside of it, even though the family is very much, she loves her family, and she's adopted them as her own. They've brought her in as well. She's seeing things from a kind of a fresh perspective of coming out there. So I don't know if that answers the question, but to me, that the wonderful thing about Victoria is, like I said, is she has this potential she doesn't know she has until you see it towards the end of the book.
And with Victoria, I think one of the things I find interesting is I guess the religious differences between her and the rest of the Izquierdos. There are things the Izquierdos do and believe that she doesn't quite do and believe. Just that scene, just the scene in the book, in the opening, in the passage you read to us today. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So she's an outsider also, because everybody, for the majority, other than Maggie, and possibly a few other characters like Braulio, most of the family is very Catholic, and even Gonzalo, who is he's not really practicing. He's more like he has cultural pride in being Catholic, but he never goes to church. And so she brings that other perspective to the family, that she's like a non-denominational charismatic Christian. And so to me, that like if you're familiar with our area here, like everybody wants to say, when you read Chicano literature, you read Latino literature, if religion is addressed at all, it's usually addressed from a very Catholic perspective. And so, but there's a richer like variety of different kinds of beliefs, certainly in my family, certainly in the families in the region, and I would argue elsewhere. So she, like Victoria, is also an outsider in that she doesn't share their beliefs. And again, I won't give too much away, but you see it's like this reconciliation of what they believe what she believes, and coming together as a leader in the family.
Thank you very much for answering that. And then speaking about, I feel like this is a good segue because this chapter is, this is Victoria's chapter, host. I know you and I had lots of conversations about host. I remember you talked to me about how the inspiration for it was James Joyce's The Dead. And I remember once you said, I was like, yes, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, are there other books and other authors that influence your writing of the stories in this novel?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, I have a lot of literary influence. I could talk a long time. But I would say, I came up, I started reading other like Chicano authors, Latino authors, like in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. So some of the early influences were like Ana Castillo was one of them. Certainly Rodolfo Anaya. Somebody mentioned, like when I hear you, I hear Anaya. Certainly that was another influence for me. But, even going back further, there's a lot of different authors that, they'll talk about families and they'll talk about, our experiences. But when you get into like the more modern authors, I would say like my favorite authors, Luis Alberto Reya. And so, and then you have, Kirsten Valdez Quaid, we mentioned The Five Wounds. And as I read them, it's funny how like, I know that we were writing at these books at the same time. I know that, The House of Broken Angels, Urrea's book, and then you have The Five Wounds. We were writing these things simultaneously, obviously, because just the way that the timing worked. And you read them and you're like, oh my gosh, like they did that. Like we did that in isolation of each other, because I didn't read these later books until, the book was already in its mid to final edits, submitting it. But yeah, early influences for sure. Anaya, Ana Castillo. I would also add Sandra Cisneros a little bit. But there's too many. I mean, I can look at my bookshelf, but there's so many authors to mention. But like stylistically, who I looked at a lot to like, man, I wish I could write as beautifully with that as that is Jhumpa Lahiri. And if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. But Interpreter of Maladies was like, I wish I could have written that book, but like the Chicano version of that book. But I just, there were so many good writers. Yeah, I could just go on and on for sure.
Well, I think this has been a fantastic conversation, and I feel like, actually, no, before we go, I have to ask you a thing. I feel like we can't leave without talking about music in this book, because there is actually quite a fair amount of music. Music has a special place in this book. Mm-hmm. There's a whole chapter on Selena, which also is so voice driven, and I love that chapter. There's so much personality in that voice. There's also the family singing and dancing at the end of Host. And, there is Dina listening to her father's old records. Mm-hmm. And I just want us to talk a little bit about the music in this book and, how it all came about, that there's so much of it in the book, and how that came about. And I wonder if it played a role in the process of crafting this book. I know you wrote it over several years, but mm-hmm. I do want to have just some sort of something there.
Well, I'm going to share something I've never shared before, but my father was a DJ in the 70s. And so he was a DJ. We lived in Indiana, and he had a Sunday night radio show where he would play Mexican music. And there was this 1 hour slot Sunday nights where he would play music, but he was also a dance promoter. So as a kid, I got to see all these like really famous people at dance halls, and like veteran centers and all these things. My dad would throw these dances, and everyone, like every Mexican American person, Latino, a lot of different Latino folks would get together at these dances like from miles around. We'd get hundreds of peoples and folks, and we would see Los Tigres, Maria Felix, all these names that these huge acts would go to Indiana, of all places. And so it created in me a love for music. And I'm no expert on all the different music that's out there, but when I had that influence and seeing these groups and everything else, it's so much a part of the culture. And like at any party we have, and we, when you see a party in the Family Izquierdo, I'm describing a party that you can see in my family. There's always music playing. It's such a huge component of our celebrations. So I definitely wanted to add that. And then, Selena is just Selena, right? So she's such a big part of our mythos here in the Rio Grande Valley. So definitely wanted to add that. And like I said, as I was, writing the book, one of the things I did is I actually created a playlist of all these people I was, mentioning in the stories, and Dina's story, who's, she's the one that has the family record collection. So yeah, music is a huge part of our culture, a part of my family's culture, and just my upbringing. And I thank my father for that, of me being exposed to great music at a very early age.
Wow. Okay, I did not know any of that. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's fantastic. And I would love to see that playlist if you are willing to share it. I think.
Yeah, I'll share that out. I had fun putting that together for sure.
Great. Okay, that's it for me, questions wise. Let me know if you have any questions that you want me to address. And here is Angela, I think.
Yeah, that's so cool. I knew it was going to be great. It was great. Such a great conversation. I love learning that about your dad and being a DJ.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely get us that playlist. We're gonna need the playlist, and we'll get it to everybody.
Oh, I'll do that.
Do that. You should have it like in the paperback version when it comes out, like the playlist.
Yeah, or maybe on the second edition we could put a CD in the back, right?
Yeah, like Norton's like, oh yeah, let's throw money at that. That would be so cool, though. That would be so
Right?
cool. I also love hearing how you and Kirsten and Luis all kind of had this like, you're doing your own thing, you're writing your own thing, and then but each of you like kind of had this magic, and your books all came out and are just amazing. Like so.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both. We are going to do our announcement, and I love doing it tonight because Noma's really like, I've worked with Noma since Politics and Prose. We've known each other since like, geez, 8 years, 7 years. I don't even know, whatever. But like, the whole reason I started Duende was because I worked with so many talented, brilliant people, and I just wanted to amplify and center their voices, our voices as, Black and Brown Indigenous people and booksellers. And that was a big reason why I wanted to do this award, because I wanted to be able to, I don't know, no one knows how I am. I just want to give everybody a big hug. Y'all do such amazing work. The booksellers do amazing work. Noma, now you're an editor doing amazing work, helping deliver these stunning novels, like Family Izquierdo, and I just want to keep giving and giving. Like I've been talking a lot about abundance, and like how abundance, like you want to work from a place of abundance, not a place of scarcity. And these awards are that. And I'm so lucky to work with the Word, who also work from a place of abundance and who also celebrate, our voices. And so in the middle of the pandemic, I sort of talking to Vinyanka, who's the executive director at the Word, and we love each other. And I was like, let's do an award and see if we could get a little bit of money. And I also want to thank Noel Santos all the time, always. She's donated so much, but she also like pushed us to like have even be able. The first it was like I think it was like a $500 award for the recipients, and she's like, do more, and she's totally right. So I'm always forever grateful to Noelle for her advice and for her generosity. She also works from such a beautiful place of abundance. So tonight, this is the third year that we are doing this award, and and I am going to announce the names. This is, of course, in celebration of Margins Bookselling Month, which is sponsored by The Word. And if you should definitely learn more about them. I don't know if they want to like drop a link in there, but oh yeah, Ruben just dropped his playlist. That is so cool. Um, and then also just if anybody's out there and you are interested in supporting this award and maybe making a monetary donation so we can keep giving these $1,000 awards. There's 3 awards, so you'll like learn about the awards, and we just try to give them a substantial amount of money because this is not an industry where we make a lot of money, and it's the only industry award of its kind. There's not really a whole lot of other opportunities like this for Black and brown booksellers. So with that in mind, okay, so let's go ahead and Alyssa, you can come on screen, like share the joy. I feel silly doing this by myself. Yeah, that's right. All right. The 2002 Duende Word BIPOC Bookseller Award winners are for innovation is Ananda Werner. They is the general manager of a Room of One's Own bookstore, which is an awesome bookstore. Love Room of One's Own. The queer and trans-owned space located in Madison, Wisconsin. She has been variously a florist, a bartender, and a library page, but always a book lover through and through. And their debut chapbook is forthcoming in 2023 from Ugly Duckling Press, which I'm very excited about. All right, and the second award winner for activism is Pilot Verrett, who is a journalist, television writer, and bookseller born and raised in New York. Their writing has appeared everywhere from the New York Times and the Atlantic to Sesame Street and Pinecone and Pony. I mean, this is so cool. In 2020, Pilot co-founded the Rolling Library, an abolitionist mutual aid group that believes in education over incarceration and community over capitalism. Right up our alley. TRL provides free books and literacy events to the New York City area through free book fairs, pop-ups, and the installation of little free libraries, primarily at NYCHA residences. This is so amazing. Pilot also works at their local bookstore, Astoria Bookshop, another place we love, and is a member of the Astoria Food Pantry team, the 31st Avenue Open Streets Collective, and other mutual aid groups that are fighting for Black and queer liberation. And currently, Pilot lives in Queens with their partner, a very cute dog, and a very cute rabbit. Like, don't you just inspired just reading about these people? Now, I don't have the official bio for the next person, but I can personally vouch that he's amazing. So, and I'm completely unsurprised that this person won for our leadership this year. Consistently gone to somebody that is just truly doing everything that needs to happen in this industry. The first year it went to Hannah Oliver Depp, the owner of Loyalty Bookstores. You guys know we love each other to death and have known each other for forever. But she, if you pay any attention, you see that she's doing all the things. And then last year it went to Michelle Malonzo, who is now the chief operating officer at The Word. So she is also doing amazing things. So, and this year it goes to Calvin Crosby, who is the co-owner of the King's English bookstore in Utah. He's also the former executive director of Kaliba, which is the California Booksellers Regional. And he's just I'm on the American Booksellers Association board, and we were like, this person would be amazing for the board. He's just he does all the things, and he does it in the face of a lot of challenges. And I know that if I had his official bio, it would just be a whole list of just amazing things that he's done. But we will get that to you. And I want to thank The Word for all of their administrative work and helping put these together. I want to thank everybody who stayed to learn more about our winners. I want to thank Alyssa. I want to thank Nneoma, Ruben, everybody. This is a joyful time. So yeah, gracias. Gracias.
I'll just add one more thing. This year we had over 60 nominations.
That's so wonderful.
So it was a very hard job for the judges, and we're really excited to continue to be hard for the judges to pick.
Huge thank you to our judges, who are amazing.
Our judges were huge thanks to them. And it works really well with Margin's book selling month, which we're in the middle of right now. This is October. In October, we celebrate Margin's booksellers, right? And the reason we do that is because it's an ecosystem, especially in this like culture of like banned books, you know, where so many of our books are specifically being targeted by policymakers that don't even read the books before they ban them, right? Like it's purely political. It's really radical for us to be able to like honor these booksellers that are still doing the radical work of putting our books in the hands of the people that need them, right? That need to see themselves on the page. So
Yeah.
it's super exciting to be able to do this, and we'll make the official announcement like on social media and all that good stuff tomorrow, but we wanted to share the love and the joy for this now. And so thank you so much, Ruben, for, you know, joining us and for allowing us to use this event as an opportunity to share some more love. And yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. Thank you for always coming out. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for helping build this community. You know, we are powerful because of you. And that's just how it is. So thank you, you guys. Have a wonderful night.